Welcome back to another episode of the Mindset Doctor podcast. Here with a good friend of mine, Pastor Terrell Somerville. Thank you for being on the show.
Glad to be here, Dr. J. That's what I call you, Dr. J.
Yeah,
Have
Dr. J.
For almost 15 years.
Right, yeah. So we met, and it's cool how we met, too, because right before we were opening our practice, we were out in the community meeting people, and we met a lady who came in and referred her family and brought in her mother-in-law.
Yeah.
And then she invites you and Shanda, your wife, to our dinner with the doctor.
Yes.
And that's where you got to hear about who we are and what we do. And you guys became patients and over the years became great friends.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
one of the things I love that I've gotten to know you over the years, well, two things. One is your heart for people.
Yes.
You just really love people.
Yes.
And your heart for Jesus.
Yes.
And how strong that is.
Yes.
And we're here today because I really want to dive in. You just wrote a book, Spiritually Freed.
Yes.
And it's all about your story going from a jail cell to leading for Jesus.
Yes.
So I want you to kind of start us back to, I mean, you went from a locked up here in Sumner County to now leading a church that's thriving here in Sumner County.
Yes.
So kind of give us that backstory. Where did it start? And then bring us through to where you are today.
Well, I grew up in a Christian home and gave my life to Christ at 12. But it was that moment when one of my friends, he opened his hand and it was a joint rolled up in a strawberry rolling paper. And that was the beginning of the trek of going to the point of dealing marijuana. And then I got caught in a sting operation. And then I ended up spending 20 days in Sumner County Jail at 18 years old. It's right after I graduated high school. And the thing about it was, you brought shame and reproach on my family, and your name's in the paper. It was all on the Nashville news and all that kind of stuff. And so when I got in there, you just feel like the scum of the earth. And so I prayed two prayers. I said, God, I've got myself into this mess. I said, I'll do anything you want me to if you'll get me out of this mess. And I said, second to that, I said, if you'll give me, if you'll just lead me to a woman that will give me the incentive to marry her, get away from this friend circle that I'm going into, I'll do anything you want me to. I'll serve her. I'll take my family to church, do anything, just get me out of this mess. Well, when I got out of jail, I didn't walk out on the lawn after the 20 days and angels were there and wasn't like that. But I continued on a trek over just the next few years. And I wasn't perfect by no means. I still remember going out and drinking and things like that. But it came to a point that when I did meet her, actually, she chased me down in my little Triumph Spitfire. It's in the book, and took her for a ride. And then through a series of providential times I met her, God revealed to me that it was her. Wow. And so I proposed to her really fast. I mean, I'm talking like 3 months.
Yeah.
And she turned me down. And then through a series of events, she's let me know later on after another guy was on the scene that she had been a part of her life and she decided it was me. So we ended up getting married. And the journey started out in going to her church and God using me to teach a Sunday school class for like 7 years. And it was almost like my Arabia with Paul, learning the scriptures. And so next thing you know, God calls me in the ministry. I wrestled with that. He was calling me to preach the gospel. And then next thing I know, I started going to school. I had
before you get to that too, because you do share in the book, like you reached out to other people, mentors and others,
I did.
And they kind of discouraged you from doing that. So tell us about that.
Well, whenever I wrestled for about 3 weeks in the summer of '97, I wrestled with this call and this burden. And I reached out to my mom's pastor and he said, you've got the burden of the word, he called it, like Jeremiah. And so I talked to my pastor about it. Well, then when I finally told my mom, she cried because she had grown up in the local church, in the traditional church, and seen what pastors went through. And she didn't want that for me.
Right.
And that was a tough part there for me to wrestle with that.
Yeah.
But I remember distinctly preaching my first message the last Sunday of July in 1997. And that Sunday I preached a message from Revelation 20:15. Is your name in the book of life? And a little boy named Andy Whited, I think I put it in the book, came and gave his life to the Lord. And that was his way, God's way of telling me, this is a journey and a path I want you to go on.
Yeah. So confirmation there.
It was, yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
So then, give us the story from there. Because you don't just all of a sudden become a pastor. You're still working full time. You're trying to figure this out. What does it look like?
Well, I was working for a Japanese corporation, had a great job. And I started off preaching, and that first year was amazing. In the old traditional church, you did what you call revivals. And so I got on the revival circuit. A bunch of people gave their lives to Christ that first year, and I was going to school. But what got me was this, is that Dr. Rick Warren, that wrote The Purpose-Driven Life, a lot of people know that story, but he wrote a book before it called The Purpose-Driven Church. I think it sold probably 1 million copies, which is amazing. But I read that, Shannon and I did, while I was going to school. And that's when God put it on my heart about starting a church. But here's the backstory to that. Because of my gift of evangelism, that's a spiritual gift God gave me, I did not want to be a pastor. I just wanted to be an evangelist. I even made cards about being an evangelist. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me and all this stuff. And I had a lot of opportunities to preach the gospel. But I didn't want to pastor. I didn't want to do none of that. I just wanted to be an evangelist. Well, when we read that book, God impressed on my spirit, you're not only going to pastor a church, you're going to start the church, you're going to pastor. Wow. And that's what happened.
So then you started out, was it the YMCA here locally?
Yes, what we did, I was being a student pastor, youth pastor at my home church. Shannon and I left and went to my home church for just a couple of years. And during that time was when that happened. And I had got called up to a church in Kentucky to go up there and just be like an interim pastor. Well, while I was there, I had someone reach out to me about starting a church. But before that, we tried to meet that guy. They have like the summer conference for all the worldwide churches. And Shannon and I said, well, God's putting this call on our heart to start a church. We never could talk to the guy. Well, then by the end of the year, they wanted us to, I was bivocational. I was working for a Japanese corporation, and they wanted me to be their full-time, part-time pastor. You know what I'm saying? Well, same week, this guy calls me and says, hey, I want you to meet with me and this guy that we didn't get to meet with in the summer that was always busy. So we went to Old Charlie's in Rivergate, talked about it, and I said, hey, they're treating us good. They're good to me and my wife and my 3 daughters. If it's of God, we'll do it. And if not, I won't. Well, when I went home, I started having all these visions of the first Sunday and what it was going to be like, and would get up in the middle of the night and write things down. And it was just a crazy move of God in my heart and mind. And then I had to go back to them and say, hey, I got to start this church. And they were good to me, and they understood. They even gave us a financial compensation to be able to go and do it. And then we met in the YMCA in the fall of 2001. We met in the YMCA and started having vision meetings. I went to a church planting boot camp to learn how to do it. And we launched the church with about 30-something adults, March 3rd, 2002, in Hendersonville High School.
Wow. And then you share in the book, too, you got to a point where Hendersonville High School was kicking you out, and you had to make a change. Then what happened?
Well, here we are. We're meeting in the high school, okay, and we had a good relationship with the principal. Well, the principal, Paul Decker, retires. Another principal comes in. Well, we was meeting in the theater there in Hendersonville High School, and we would give them money. We would do things for the high school. We left it better than we found it. There was a representative that was there each Sunday to open up and, and shut down and all that. But the teachers seen an avenue. They didn't want us there anymore. So they were going to kick us out. So then that's when I had to scramble real quick and try to figure out what we were going to do. But prior to that, what was really cool was that I started searching for land. And the 15 acres that our campus is on Vietnam Vets over here in Greenlee, I went to our county building and I saw this property for sale. It was before the interstate came through. And I went to the guy's house and I asked him, I said, hey, I'm so-and-so. We've started a brand new church. We would like to buy your property. He said, it's not for sale. Just kind of not a mean guy, but just a country guy. And I left there and I drove out his long driveway, Dr. J, and I said, God, you got to do something with this guy's attitude. I know. I prayed over the land. I knew he led me over there. And I said, you got to do something with attitude. He thinks he owns it. So I go home and I tell Shannon, she says, you did what? You went and asked a guy to buy property without any money. I said, yeah, I did. I said, God owns a cattle of 1,000 hills. And I said, if it's meant for us to have it, we're going to have it. Well, on to fast forward, by the third time I went, he said, $500,000. I said, we might be able to do that. We did a building campaign to be able to buy the property, and it became ours in partnering with our denominational finance division. And then the 2 years later in 2006 is when they was kicking us out. Well, we couldn't afford to go and lease something that was going to be as much as a payment was. So a lot of great people stepped up and we started the building process, and we were able to be out of the building by December. We had to be out December 1 of 2006. I led the project because I built several houses. A friend of mine was a commercial builder. I led it myself. We did it. And by the December 1, we were out because the previous Sunday we had like 88 people at the high school. The next Sunday was December 3rd, 2006. We had like 150 people, which was double and well-wishers and all of that.
Yeah.
Then we did a grand opening in January of 2007, and I emailed the news stations, and they bit because the school had kicked us out.
Right.
And so they bid on it, did like a 2 or 3 minute story, and we went from being 88 to 150 to 420 people showing up at the grand opening.
Wow.
We immediately had to go to a couple of services that Easter.
Yeah.
Because we were out of room.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and then from there you've expanded to an even bigger building now, and just God's really blessing what you're doing.
yes.
And as I was reading the book, I was thinking, a mentor of mine, he has this quote he shared with me: "You are perfectly positioned to serve the person you once were." And I was thinking about your story. Like, you are serving the people you once were. And it didn't have all the things. It didn't go right all the time.
That's right.
And I think that's the misconception with pastors or anybody, these Christians.
Yes.
They think, oh, they live a perfect life. And that's not how it is.
Not at
I
all.
think about people that are listening right now and think about the challenges you've been through and the things that you faced, the obstacles you've overcome, the lessons you learned. You've been through those for a reason. You can share those with other people.
Yes.
And that's what you're doing with your book. But how is using your story and what you've been through, how do you use that to drive you to what you do today?
Well, the thing about it is just staying focused. You know, I've always said, when you come to Christ, no matter where you're at, there's a direction God wants to take you. And what we end up doing, whether you're leading a very lucrative business or you're in ministry or you're on the team with a company, whatever you're doing, God is leading you in a direction. And what people end up doing, they get bogged down in the details of everything going around them. And then they begin to look at situations. They begin to look at circumstances, or they begin to get their eyes on other people. And every time you do, the enemy comes in and he pulls our eyes on those things instead of keeping our eyes on God. And every time you take your eyes off God and put your eyes on those things, you're not going to go in the direction God's trying to take you.
Yeah. And I was thinking through, you mentioned earlier when you went to your mom, she got emotional because she'd seen what pastors had been through. And you get real in this book. You talk about how she said that the sheep bite.
Yes.
So I want to get real right now. Like, what are some of the things pastors face that a lot of times we don't hear those sides of the story?
Well, when you're dealing with, and you're leading a large church like we have, whenever you are leading those people, a lot of times you'll have staff, and you do your best to be able to vet your staff. You do your best to be able to do the culture indexes, just like any company will. You do your best to be able to make good hires. But then sometimes those people, they go rogue. They just always do. And you deal with those kind of things and cuts and hurts. And so I've dealt with those over the years. And also one of the biggest things, and in the book I talk about a couple of different pastors. There's the great pastor resignation and why guys are getting out of it and people are getting away from ministry, is that a lot of the congregates don't realize that. An example here recently in the last couple of years, I'll use one example of one person that just popped in my mind. This person had been in our ministry for 15 years. Well, then they decided that they were just going to go to another church.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that if they do that, but they never came and had a conversation. They didn't even send an email, nothing. They just ghost you.
Yeah.
And what happens, and what I talk about in the book, one particular pastor, he got ghosted so many times that he had a nervous breakdown. And when he did, he went to the doctor and they said, well, what war were you in? He said, I wasn't in war. I've never been in the military. He said, well, you have the signs from your brainwaves of PTSD. And so he identified 182 unresolved relationships in a 20-year ministry, and it wrecked him.
Wow.
And see, a lot of people don't realize, and I understand people want to leave incognito. They don't want to have those hard conversations. But when you're in a relationship with somebody, you know, you and I just aren't going to leave our wives and ghost them and leave.
Right.
You're going to have the conversation, but that's what a lot of people do in ministry. So for a lot of pastors, we just lead with pain.
Yeah. And I read a study years ago that being a pastor was one of the most medicated as far as antidepressants. Pastors
Yes.
are on antidepressants because of the stress that they have.
Yes.
And you talked about some of those burdens that pastors carry. There's an expectation. You have to be at every funeral, every time somebody gets sick, every time this, and this.
Yes.
I need the pastor.
Yes.
And what's the burden of that like? And what can you do to prevent taking it all on yourself?
Well, the good thing is having the right staff and team around you. You know, I call it the Jethro principle.
Yeah.
It'd be just like this, and I share that in the book. In Exodus 18, Moses was trying his best to lead these 2 million plus people, is what's estimated from the scriptures of that he was leading. Yeah. And here he is. He's trying to meet with all of them. They stand in line all day. They can't get to him. It's almost like I've got to go to the horse's mouth, so to speak. But Jethro his father-in-law comes in and says, you're killing yourself and you're killing the people. You got to raise people up around you. Yeah. So I call it the Jethro technique. Yep. And so that's what he did. And next thing you know, he says, now, Moses, you take care of the larger matters, but you let these different ones in each tribe that you raise up take care of the smaller matters. So that's what I've tried to do in the church. We have an amazing staff, amazing pastors and leaders that we give them the different areas, because even in business, you have to be careful to hire for your weakness, because if you don't, you're not going to succeed. Yeah. There's just no way you can wear all those hats. So I want to get people on my staff that are better than me in those areas that I'm weak in, so I can focus on the few details of what God is calling me to do. And I would advise any business, any ministry to do that. You got to focus on those things that you're good at, and you got to give away the things you're not. Yeah. And you spread it around.
I think everybody can resonate with that at some point, of feeling I'm going to take it all on myself.
Yes.
I'm just going to do this, and this. I'm going to wear all the hats.
Yes.
But that leads to burnout.
Yes.
So how do you because there's a mindset shift you have to make there too.
That's exactly right.
How do because I know you and I know your heart for people and you want to do everything.
Yes. Yes.
But knowing that leads to burnout, how did you make the decision, I have to let some of this go?
Well, I had a friend of mine that, that I had, and I've had a mentor with me for about 15 years. And he's actually one of them that endorsed my book. And I've listened to him and how he's coached me and mentored me and said, you're not going to get bigger than yourself.
That's right.
And that was a good word.
Yeah.
And he said, man, you've got to give it away. And you've got to trust other people to be able to do the things. And they're going to mess up. They're going to make mistakes. Anybody on your staff and your business, they're going to make mistakes. But how is it that you invest in them instead of pushing them down when they make a mistake? Go and talk to them, talk through the process, what happened, and then raise them up and invest in them, and then they get better. And then as you go through each situation, circumstance, business deal, whatever it is, they get better and better at that. And so that's helped me a lot, is having that person speak into my life to realize I can't do this by myself, and I spread it around. It made a huge difference for me.
Yeah. And one of the things that I wanted to come back to, well, there's 12 principles you talk about.
Right.
And is there any one that's your favorite?
You mean far as
like anyone that you think I like this one over this one, or is it just like these are the keys that I went through and I want to bring these to other people? How did you come up with the 12 principles?
Well, the one about leaving your past, which one number is that, Dr. Justin?
Leaving your past.
I think it's one of the last 10 or 11.
Looking back at what God has done, plan to succeed, hang on to love, admit your weakness, help others find freedom. Love, the last one, let go fully of your past.
Yeah, I think that's where a lot of people live at today. They have so much ramifications that happens in their past. And it's natural for our mindset, and you being a mindset doctor, you know it, our mind wants to go back there. And you're not ever going to be able to move forward to where God wants to take you as long as you keep dwelling on that which you have no control over.
Yeah.
And that's huge.
Right.
And because so many people, they get stuck in their past and they live there so much, they can't see today or what God has for them in the future. I can't change that. But I know that if I will move forward and say, you know what, God, I'm going to let that go. I'm going to leave that where it is. But I'm going to learn from that to move forward and have a better future. You know, God's in our future just waiting for us to get there.
Right.
But we stay back in the past and we miss out on everything he has for us.
Yeah. I think we all get caught up in that.
We do.
For sure.
We do.
And the book is Spiritually Freed, from landing in jail to leading for Jesus. So I'm curious, who did you write this book for?
I wrote it for any person that is bound down in their life. They are in bondage financially. They're in bondage when it comes to relationships. They're in bondage to addiction. They're in bondage when it comes to their emotions and getting wreaked on everything. Most of all, in bondage spiritually, because unless you have a right relationship with God, and John 8:32, you will know the truth and the truth will set you free. People are living bound down. They are tied up. They're like in a straitjacket every day, and they can't see the future because they're so bound down in everything they're facing, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, financially, relationally, all those things. So I want anyone to be able to read this. This is not just to be able to say, this is just my story, but this is an avenue that people can break free. And if they will put these principles into action and seek God, the best is always yet to come. Yeah. Yesterday's gone, can't change it. Today's the first day of the rest of our lives.
Absolutely.
And that's a way we got to treat it and say, you know what? There's an amazing future for me. The God of hope, the God who created us, who knit us together in our mother's womb before we were born. I don't want to miss this particular thing he knit me for. I don't want to miss that whatsoever. The psalmist David said that he ordered our steps before we were ever born. And I don't want to miss one of those steps. I want to walk in the ways that God wanted me to reach the fullest potential that he created me for.
Right. And freedom's obviously very important to you. You named your church after that.
Yes.
So where did the name come from?
Well, as I grew up, I grew up in a very traditional General Baptist atmosphere. And General Baptist is just like a Midwestern movement. It started in 1812 by a man named Benoni Stinson. They've always been more of a Midwestern movement in more smaller churches. We have a lot of mega churches now, but you didn't want to raise your hand in church. If you did, they looked at you as a charismatic.
Right.
Oh, and if somebody spoke in tongues, they would escort you out. That's just what it was. And that's just a lot of people don't understand the scriptures and where it was at. But I had watched that and I thought, you know what? You may not raise your hand, or this person might not raise your hand. Well, this person over here they might be a person that wants to lift their hands, holy hands unto the Lord, or Psalm 47, clap your hands unto the Lord. I got so tired of seeing people bound down. We all worship God in different ways as he leads us to in our heart. So that's where God said to me, Freedom Church, that you have freedom to worship him in spirit and in truth.
Yeah. Well, something interesting, when you're starting the church, you went around door to door and you're surveying people.
Yes.
And asking them about, if they have a church home. And
yes.
then it was something very interesting. What was the number one common theme of why people didn't attend church regularly?
Well, it was crazy to really, and when I go back and think about it, in our area in Hendersonville where we were, I think we interviewed and went door knocking on probably over 100 homes to get a good synopsis, to get a good idea of what they were looking at. So we had 5 questions we would ask them. First thing we'd ask, we knocked on the door and they come to the door and say, do you attend church or do you have a church family? If they say, yes, we do, thank you, God bless you. But if they said no, then we would say, why do you think most people don't attend church? We didn't say, why don't you attend church? Because if I did, I'd say, none of your business, slam a door in your face.
Exactly.
But I'd say, why do you think most people don't attend church? And then they, in essence, would give us really their reason. Number one correlating reason was dress. And it wasn't that the people couldn't afford to buy the clothes. They just didn't feel like that they could meet the requirements. Or they didn't, even if somebody couldn't afford to buy it, they weren't going to go out for a young family with kids. They're not going to go out and feel like I got to buy expensive clothes to fit in. Or if they've, a lot of times you have your professionals, and it's changed now. We've watched the deteriorating of the suit and tie, even in the professional atmosphere in business today. They didn't necessarily want to dress up on Sunday to be able to go to church. So that was the number one thing, was dress. So we have a common thing at our church. If you want to dress up, dress up. If you want to dress down, dress down. We just got one rule: wear clothes. And if you're not wearing clothes, we'll let you know you're naked.
Right. Yeah. Just wear clothes. I like that. But you do have this come as you are feel. Everybody's welcome. And I really appreciate that too, because growing up, we went to church early on, and then there was a period we didn't attend church regularly.
Right.
But my parents did sacrifice. They sent me to a Christian school. So it was part of my life. Right. But regular church attendance wasn't. And then fast forward years later, my dad starts attending Freedom Church.
Yes.
And
I love him so much.
And he became a regular attender, and just it really opened it changed his life as far as his walk with the Lord. Right. So why do you think, I've seen that with a lot of people at your church. Yes. Is it the the ability we accept you, come as you are. What do you think it is about you, your connection with the people that make them want to attend?
I think it's authenticity. It's just being authentic and being real with people. You just don't, so many times you hear this so much over and over again, especially Faith in America. People go to church and they're what I call, and I'm not being critical of them, it is a fact of how people carry themselves. They put on what I call a faith fake. And they go in, and what people do a lot of times, they're going to dress up, they're going to go to church, but they don't want to get real themselves. They don't want to act like that. They want to just act like they have it together. And I want people to come like they are so God can change them and they be different for his glory. So I'm very vulnerable on stage. I'm very vulnerable in this book to tell things that probably, I don't know, a lot of pastors, I don't know if they would do that or not, but I just want people to know that I'm real with you, I'm authentic with you, and I'm going to be vulnerable with you. And you know what? I want us to be real with God. I want us to be vulnerable with God. And I want us to be that kind of person that's going to say, you know what? I want to get this junk out so Jesus can come in and make me who he created me to be. So the person I am on stage is the person I'm going to be when you and I are talking in front of the coffee shop. Or I see somebody out in the community. I'm going to be the same person there as I am on stage. And I think that lets people know, you know, I can be real here.
And I can confirm that because I've known you for years now, and it's the same person on stage that I get behind the scenes. And we're just talking. You're that real person. Your heart shows every single Sunday. Fast forward to now, we're in a lot of churches. It's more about the entertainment. And let me entertain you, which I understand. Our culture's in that place if I just want to be entertained.
Right.
And we got social media. If I don't like this video, I can flip to the next. How do you deal with that side of things where people want to be entertained, but you need to deliver this message that God has on your heart?
Well, I think there's been a shift in church, especially the last few years. Even with when you look at the millennials and then you're beginning to look at the younger demographic, they want what's real. So I think a lot of them are shifting from, they don't want all the lights, the fog machines and all that kind of stuff, which is just part of the entertainment value. But a lot of people, they say, well, I don't want to go to church to be entertained. I want to be, and I get that. But if you look at the word entertainment and you look at the root value and what the definition is, it means capturing someone's attention for a span of time. So do I want them to be entertained? Yes. But who do I want them to be entertained by? I want the Holy Spirit of God to capture their attention for an experience for about an hour or so, that when they come in, man, when they get ready to leave, they've had a moment with their Creator. And so that's what we do. We put hundreds of hours, staff combined, to be able to say, whenever you come into to our church, it's not something that we just flippantly do. We want to put together a value that when you come in voluntarily and you spend an hour of your time, we value that so seriously that you have a time to be able to feel the presence of God and be able to get alone with God in your seat and your moment, corporately and individually, to know that when you leave, wow, I was so glad that I was there.
And you talk about that in the book, that you don't take that for granted, that they give you their time, they're there.
Yes.
You want to pour your heart out to them. So what does that look like, preparing messages that God puts on your heart, whether it's preparing for a series or each Sunday? What does it actually look like?
You know, I pray through it. If it was up to me, I would preach a lot about heaven and all that kind of things, but I listen to the pulse of the people. And number one, I do a lot of praying. And what is it the people need that's going to give them not just success, but what's going to give them significance in their walk when they leave, that they can stand strong in their faith. So that's how I do. So I will pray and I will seek God and I will say, God, what is it they need to hear? And I get a word, what you call a word from the word. Or if I'm out and about and I see something or I read a book and say, wow, that would make a great series. And when I say series is really cool. So if you do a 4 to 6 week, it's those messages tying together over a series of time. Just like this, I'm doing the Spiritually Free 6-week series based on what we're doing. So I'll spend at least anywhere from 12 to 20 hours preparing a 35 to 40 minute sermon. Because I want to be sure that if you're willing to come in and sit down for 35 to 40 minutes and listen to me, I value that time that much. I want you not to hear from me. I want you to hear from God through me, because that's the only way your life's going to be changed.
That's right. Well, and one of the things that I loved in the book is you shared perspective from your daughters. So you
Yes.
told their story throughout and their impact on your life, but then actually hearing from them and their side of things. I got
Yes.
emotional reading it.
Yes.
And one of the cool things is both India and Lily talked about like just seeing you in front of your recliner on your knees.
Yeah.
I just like that's what Daddy does. He gets there and he prays. So that was an example to them.
Yeah.
And then there was a cool story that India shared about there was a novel on her nightstand, and you ask her, well, how many times have you read that? And she said, I've read it a couple times. And then you ask her, well, how many times have you read the Bible all the way through? And it kind of, she got convicted from that. She's like, you know what? He's right. And she shared the story. She actually took your Bible because she needed to go find a Bible. She took your daily reader. So share that story with us.
Yeah, it was amazing. It wasn't what I said so much. It was our daily example, and from the time they were little, I prayed over them continually, even in their sleep, praying over them for them to become what God created them to be and to be an example. And even before they go to school each day, we would pray with them. We would read the Bible to them. I would, and I would give them an opportunity. What's going on in your life? What do you want to pray about? And it didn't matter if they wanted to pray about when they were little, Dad, I'd like to have this toy or whatever, whatever not. So I would take that opportunity to build into them the importance of things to pray for. And they understood the value of loving people and loving God, of course, first, and loving people and praying for those things. But as I built that, I prayed for them for their mate. From the time they would come out of their mom's womb, I prayed for their mate. And God, in his humor, sent all three of them a husband. And those husbands, two of them announced their calling to go into ministry. I ordained two of them. And Chloe, the youngest, her husband, Jared, he's not a preacher, so to speak, but he plays drums for us. So he calls himself the minister of percussion.
That's right. I love it.
So just in that daily walk with them and seeing what they become, they're all in ministry. They've all three been on staff at different times. And of course, now I've got all these grandkids. So there's this kind of moving toward that.
Yeah, 10 grandchildren, right?
10. And what's funny was last week, Caleb, India's husband, he's on staff at the church, and he took the book, brought me in there and said, hey, there's something about the book I need to share with you. I said, what is something wrong? I said, we went through all this editing process and all this. And so he started talking about the grandchildren. And right now we have 10 grandchildren. And he said, did you get that right? I said, yeah, I think I got the count right. I know my grandkids, Lily and Cody, they've got 4. And I said, you and India, y'all have 3, and then Jared and Chloe, the youngest, have 3. He said, well, what about Carly? Carly is an adult adoption, where India and Caleb, they adopted her. She had a home life coming up and different things. And of course, India started Daughters and Co ministry, where they're helping kids that are aging out of foster care to help get them placement. So he said, well, what about Carly? And then I said, I counted her in 3. And he said, then he smiled real big. They found out they're pregnant and they're going to have another child. So I got 11 and counting. Wow. And just pray for them because they apparently don't have any other extracurricular activities.
That's right. They're busy. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things, again, I love about this is the realness, and you go deep and you share behind the scenes.
Yes.
I think there's some misconceptions with pastors because people just see you on Sunday and they think, oh, you just show up on Sunday and you preach and that's the role.
Right.
But I mean, share about leading up to delivering a message on Sundays and what happens after that. You shared about the Monday blues that comes with that.
Yes. Well, I get excited and, like this morning in my prayer time, today's Monday, so let's go from today. I build up all week long getting ready and we always with our staff, we want to be, you got to be ready midnight Thursday. It's, whatever it is, be ready. We're ready for the weekend and all that. And then I build up on a spiritual high and then I get to share it on Sunday. And right now we're at 2 services and next we'll go to 3. We used to do 3 until we built our larger auditorium. But once that I would deliver that and I'm on that spiritual high and you empty your soul out, I call it PMSing, and people get tickled at me when I say it. Post-messages syndrome. I'm emptied out. I'm done. And then Monday comes like today. And it is the toughest day of the week because more pastors leave the ministry on Monday than any other day of the week.
Yeah.
Because the enemy fights me harder today. So I have to be in prayer harder today. This morning in my prayer time, I was saying, God, give me your strength. I'm ready for this day. And then what was crazy is just before we started today, I get a text from one of my friends that is a part of our flock. And he says, I got to the part in your book talking about Mondays, and I'm so loving the book. I want you to know I love you. I'm encouraged by you, and I'm praying for you because it's Monday.
Wow. Yeah. And that's, like you said, most pastors leave on Mondays.
Yes.
So a lot of it is the energy you put out, but I think it's getting in your head too, of thinking, did I deliver? What could have I done different? What kind of things do you, as a pastor, do you deal with?
Well, whenever I deliver the message, I always come off the stage in the first service, and we do what we call making moments better. The whole team, the production team and all that. Is there anything about the worship? Is there anything about the prayer time in the service from other people and what they're talking about? Is there anything about the message? So we go through that to see if there's anything that needs to be done better to bring glory to God and people to be able to connect better with what we're doing. I also, as far as in particular with the message, I get with my wife and say, is there anything that I did not say right? Is there anything that could be said better? Those are things we take very serious in the details, because once again, you and your beloved is going to sit out there, and your mom and dad, your sister, your family's there, and all these other families, they deserve the best. And we take every detail serious to be able to get the message across. So when you leave there, what you get on Sunday is something that you can have on Monday that's going to make your life to be able to face this world that honestly is not on our side.
Yeah. One of the things I love that you do is after each sermon, you're out there in the hallway talking with people.
Yes.
Because a lot of pastors, like, you don't see them. They'll go in the green room, they'll hang out, they'll preach the next service, they're gone.
Yes.
Why is it important for you to be out there?
You know, I got a green room. I can go in there and hang out and hide and all that. The only time I hid is that I got COVID a while back. The third time I got it.
Yeah.
So I did come off stage and stay in there because I was already ready for the weekend, and I wasn't anything wrong. I was feeling fine, but I had it. Didn't want to give it to anybody. But the reason that I come off stage and I go to what we call our next steps area is because there's hardly ever a Sunday that someone doesn't give their life to Christ. So I was the one that God used to connect them with Christ. So I want to be at next steps that they can come and meet me, that we can lead them in their next steps with God.
Right.
I also want to be there that if there's brand new people comes in, I don't want to be that pastor that shares and then stays in his green room and they wonder, where's he at? Now, don't get me wrong. I do know the larger a ministry gets, the more you got to guard that. But I don't care how large our ministry gets. I want to be that person that they can meet down here off the stage, the person that was sharing with them on the stage. I love it. It's important to me. I love people. I want to meet people, and I want to hear their story. I want to hear what's going on in their life and all those kind of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And you shared in the book about going to Israel.
Yes.
And you got me one of your trips to Israel, and it has Jerusalem on the back. So this is very powerful to me. I keep it with my Bible every day. I just pick this up and I just think about it's from the land where Jesus walked.
Yes.
And it just means so much to me. So explain that experience, to be able to go there, be baptized in the Jordan River, and be on the land where Jesus was, where he did his miracles, all those things. What was that like, and how did that affect you?
Oh, it was amazing. The first time I went was 1999, and my wife was very much the proponent to get me to go. And Dr. Chuck Swindoll, which is well-renowned. A lot of people know him. Great writer, great pastor. Was the president of Dallas Theological Seminary for a long time. Went in 1999, and it was incredible that when you fly there and you actually walk where Jesus walked, is an incredible peace that comes along with it. Now, we can read the Bible, but what's amazing on your journey walking there, it is the only religion that has a geographical location. I don't know if you ever thought about that.
Yeah, I haven't thought about
So when you go over there and you go on a journey, 7, 8, 10 days, and you go to each of the spots all the way from the north up around Nazareth, where he was born at, and you go all the way to the south to the Dead Sea, and you go on that pilgrimage of Jesus' journey, then you look in your Bible, then every time you read it from that point forward, then it comes alive. It's like the words are jumping off the page at you. But then you go to the Temple Mount, and they know for sure the actual steps that Jesus walked in on. You can actually walk in on those southern steps, same steps that Yeshua, the Messiah, Jesus, walked in on. It's just a powerful moment. So the first time I went, it was incredible, was baptized in the Jordan River. And then Shanda and I and two other couples went back with Chuck Swindoll in 2014. Well, then since then, we led a group from our church in 2018, and we led another group in 2022. Mm-hmm. And just to get to be with the people and watch the lights come on and their walk with the Lord and the Shekinah glory of God, you just see them light up and they're journaling, and just the difference it's made. It's incredible. Mm-hmm. It's like getting a 4-year theological degree in a week's time.
Wow. That's powerful.
Yes.
And I have to ask you about this. You mentioned, I think a few years back, you had a health scare that made you realize, like, I've got to have a succession plan for the church.
Yes.
And the very end of the book, it kind of sounds like, is Pastor Terrell going to ride off into the sunset here? Are we getting close to the end? Is he preparing for the next steps? Where do you feel like this is? Is this years down the road, or is there something coming soon?
Well, to answer what it was, back in 2018, I'm a hunter and fisherman. I was going to go deer hunting at Fort Campbell Army Base, and I felt weird about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and something wasn't right. I've never had issues. I've always had low blood pressure. Yeah. Well, I got up and had really high blood pressure, and so it ended up, after calling the doctor and going through that, they said get to the emergency room. After having a CT scan, I found out that I had an aneurysm in the candy cane part of my heart, and it was 4.1, and ended up going to Vanderbilt to the heart specialist, and they checked it and said, you're okay right now. Talked about some things there. It was really a scare for me. But what got me was I went back 2 years later for my 2-year check. And when they initially done the scan, it showed that according to the measurements that this person had done, that it had grown significantly. And it scared the daylights out of me.
Right.
It scared my wife. It scared my kids.
Yeah.
And so I thought I was going to have a succession plan right then.
Right.
But it ended up, thank God, through the day, they didn't even want me to leave Nashville. I was still there at Vanderbilt. And they went in and took me into another scan and realized it hadn't grown. Sure. So I'm thinking, wow. So to answer all that, to say this, every day's a gift, and we have to look at it that way. But far as my succession plan and what I'm going to do in the future, my mentor and coach, Steve Stroop, he's one of the ones that endorsed it. I talked to him about retirement, and Shannon and I sat down with him and we talked about the future and all that. And he said, never use the word retirement any longer. He said, retirement is when you go to heaven. Yeah. He said, you're going to transition from pastoring one day, and then God's going to call you into whatever it is he wants you to do for that season of your life. And so with that being said, I'm looking, is it going to be 5 years, 10 years? I don't know, because the difference in a person that's in business and a person that's in ministry and the call of God, I have a different CEO, and that's the Father in heaven, and he's going to let me know. So I want to go as long as he wants me to go. I want to go as far as he wants me to go. And then, of course, am I praying about who would be the person? Like when you look where Elijah passed the mantle to Elisha. Yeah. I'm praying about that person. And I know God's going to reveal that person to me. And then what I'll do, I'll overlap that for a year or two to be able to get them ready, because that way that person may be able to take the ministry much further than when God has used me to do it. And that's what I'm excited about.
Yeah. Well, I was very inspired by your book, and I think a lot of people will be, especially hearing your story, because you could have gone from a jail cell to a hell cell had you not changed your life.
Right.
But you did, and you shifted, and you talked about your heart for evangelism and becoming a pastor. And I've even shared with you recently my heart to, God's given me this platform. How can I use it to glorify him?
Yes.
And I was even moved even more. Like, how do I begin sharing my faith more, evangelizing? What advice would you give to the people that are reading this and they're like, I want to share my faith more? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, I think a lot of times we get so ingrained each day. We're looking at our iCal. I got to do this. I got to go here. I've got this lunch. I've got this. What I try to think of each day, God, give me an opportunity to share my faith that I know undoubtedly it's a moment to be able to plant a seed for you. So many times people get so scared that they've got to know all the scripture or what we call the Roman road or whatever. No, it's just simply about an opportunity to have your spiritual antennas up, that you have an opportunity just to plant a seed with somebody.
Yeah.
And it's very important because that's what Paul talked about there. And I think it's 1 Corinthians 3. He said that we're to plant the seeds and water them, but God gives the increase. Mm-hmm. So as we walk in our faith, just planting a good seed of hope. And that's what I look to do, to plant that seed. And then you never know in the link of the chain. There could be somebody far away from God here, but somebody that's over here really close to God. And we all be seed planters. Then there'll be the moment that they can cross that line of faith and become what God created them to be.
That's powerful. So I highly recommend Spiritually Freed, Pastor Terrell Somerville. It's on Amazon. I'm sure freedomchurch.com. They could get it there as well.
Well, we don't have it on our website. We talk about it at the church, but if they just go to Amazon and type in Spiritually Freed book, they'll find it.
Find it there.
Yeah.
And then what if they want to find out more about you, whether it's social media, website, where should they go for that?
Yes. They can, I'm on Facebook. They can go there and just type in Terrell Somerville. They can go there. I have what do you call it? Public figure page there on that. Yeah. They can go there on that. If they'd like to check out, no matter where they're at, we have an online presence on Sundays for Freedom Church. Yeah. All they got to do is type in Freedom Church Gallatin, Tennessee. They can like us, Freedom Church Gallatin, Tennessee, on YouTube. Subscribe to that. We're on YouTube. It's on our website, which is freedomfamily.us. They can watch live on Sundays at 9 or 10:30, and love for them to do that. And most of all, if they do get the book, what I'm excited about, if it can change any life, that's what I'm excited about. If they do pick up the book, give a review on it because, a friend of mine, he just wrote a book. I was on a podcast yesterday, and he's in South Florida in a mega church, and we were talking about it, and it's all about the algorithms.
That's right.
And it's not about lucrative things, nothing about that. It's just he and I have a heart for people, and we want to get the word out. And if it can help one person become everything God created them to be, that's what this is all about, because every day, the best is always yet to come.
Absolutely. And share it with other people. I think my dad just bought a copy and then bought a copy you guys at the church, or buy one, give one.
Yes.
And you buy it for yourself and then you give it. You guys are doing a ministry to help the prisoners because that's you serving the people you once were.
Yes.
So you got a heart for that, and definitely leave the review because like you said, it's the algorithm. The more people are going to go through Amazon, they're going to see this book. What they really want to know is what are other people saying about this book? And a lot of times that can talk them into reading it for themselves.
Yes.
But I highly recommend it. I got tons of things highlighted in here. So I appreciate you sharing your story, and thank you for being on the Mindset Doctor podcast.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Justin. Enjoyed it immensely. Thank you very much.